All right. On that note, we will now get to the Tyranny of Time. I did read I read the opening bit of this, and it sounds pretty interesting. I too hate time, but it is an inevitable
Hmm.
fact that we are heading slowly to our own demise. But
Yeah, but what's that got to do with time?
I mean, I guess we're gonna find out, aren't we? I guess
Hmm.
we're gonna find out. So this article is called "The Tyranny of Time." The clock is a useful social tool, but it is also deeply political. It benefits some, marginalizes others, and blinds us from a true understanding of our own bodies and the world around us. Very interesting.
Exactly.
And it is by
Hot clocks.
Joe, and I probably would not be able to pronounce his name, but Zadeh or Zadeh?
Is that it?
We'll go with that. Joe. All right, so here we go. On a damp and cloudy afternoon on February 15th, 1894, a man walked through Greenwich Park in East London. His name was Marshal Bourdin. French, 26 years of age, with slicked back dark hair and a mustache. He wandered up the zigzagged path that led to the Royal Observatory, which just 10 years earlier had been established as the symbolic and scientific center of globally standardized clock time, Greenwich Mean Time, as well as the British Empire. In his left hand, Bourdin carried a bomb, a brown paper bag containing a metal case full of explosives. As he got closer to his target, he primed it with a bottle of sulfuric acid. But then, as he stood facing the observatory, it exploded in his hand, which would suck.
Hmm.
Well, I mean, not only will it suck, they explain why it would suck. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. No, they explain.
The detonation was sharp enough to get the attention of two workers inside. Rushing out, they saw a park warden and some schoolboys running towards a crouched figure on the ground. Bourdin was moaning and screaming. His legs were shattered. One arm was blown off, and there was a hole in his stomach. He said nothing about his identity or his motives, as he was carried to a nearby hospital where he died 30 minutes later. Yeah, not a great way to
No.
go. Nobody knows for sure what Bourdin was trying to do that day. An investigation showed that he was closely linked to anarchist groups. Double face there. Numerous theories circulated that he was testing the bomb in the park for a future attack on a public place or was delivering it to someone else. But because he had primed the device and was walking the zigzag path, many people, including the Home Office explosives expert Vivian Daring Magendie and the novelist Joseph Conrad, who loosely based his book The Secret Agent on the event, suspected that Bourdin had wanted to attack the observatory. Bourdin, so the story goes, was trying to bomb clock time as a symbolic revolutionary act or under a naive pretense that it may actually disrupt the global measurement of time. I mean, that's some anti time dedication right there.
Fuck yes.
He wasn't the only one to attack clocks during this period. In Paris, rebels simultaneously destroyed public clocks across the city. And in Bombay, the famous
That was in the Paris Commune.
yes, and in Bombay, the famous
Yeah.
Crawford Market. Oh, sorry, what was that?
It doesn't like actually specify, but like it was like a big thing during the Commune where like they went out and shot
Clock.
down all of the clocks in the city.
Yeah, and in Bombay,
Yeah.
the famous Crawford Market clock was shattered with gunfire by protesters. Around the world, people were angry about time. Don't get a lot of anger towards time in to this degree. Don't hear many people blowing
No,
themselves
because
up.
it's become such a like
Normalized it.
quote unquote natural thing. Like we're just used to it. Whereas back then, like clocks were still being imposed on people.
Now everyone like, you know what? They made Casio
We've
watches
been
to be cool.
domesticated.
It's the fault of the Casio watch. That's what I'm blaming it on. They're like, it can also calculate,
Sure.
and now like, you know, now we got smartphones. and it's the end of the world. And now we got NFTs, all right?
Yeah. This is why we gotta get rid of clocks. No clocks, no NFTs.
uh,
Oh,
and I will say, this NFT brought to you by the refreshing taste of Diet Pepsi. Whenever you're sitting at home thinking about newts, frogs, and toads, don't forget Diet Pepsi. There you go. You're welcome, Corten. You're welcome. Cheers.
Diet Pepsi, the perfect amphibian drink. It already is part liquid and part air mixed together. So if you put salamanders or frogs, toads, not really. They're a little bit more in favor of solids. But if you put them in some nice Diet Pepsi, boom, you have saved them from extinction. You've removed their fungal, bullshit. Diet Pepsi is a cure-all for newts and frogs and some toads, not all. Be careful about the toads.
This Pepsi ad that you just did would not run on television. That's way too long.
Why?
We do have a German Mao quote to get to. Are you ready for this one? This one's short, so it's just like right to the point.
Okay.
Policy and tactics are the life of the party. Leading comrades at all levels must give them full attention and must never on any account be negligent. That was from a circular on the situation, March 20th, 1948.
Oh my god, I love that.
On
Every
the
time that anything
situation.
happens, I'm gonna put in a circular on the situation.
I can't, like, why? Why is this in this book? I don't know. I wanted to understand the quotation selection process. I will say that is
Yeah.
that is the end of the first part. We just finished the first part,
Wow.
which was
What's
the
the second
Communist
part?
Party. We are now on classes and class struggle. That is where we're at now.
Okay. See, so maybe now we're getting into like the meat of things, you know?
We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Thank you, Noah, for the using of your channel point. We will get back to this. Now, return to our regular programming. The destruction of clocks seems outlandish now. Contemporary society is obsessed with time. It is the most used noun in the English language. Is it? Maybe. Probably. Since clocks with dials and hands first appeared on church towers and town halls, we have been bringing them closer towards us, into our workplaces and schools, our homes, onto our wrists, and finally into the phone, laptop, and television screens that we stare at for hours each day. We discipline our lives by the time on the clock, our working lives and wages are determined by it, and often our free time is rigidly managed by it too. Excuse me. Broadly speaking, even our bodily functions are regulated by the clock. We usually eat our meals at appropriate clock times as opposed to whenever we are hungry, go to sleep at appropriate clock times as opposed to whenever we are tired, and attribute more significance to the resting tones of a clock alarm than the apparent rising of the sun at the center of our solar system. A long sentence. The fact that there is a strange shame in eating lunch before noon is a testament to the ways in which we have internalized the logic of the clock. Honestly, I don't feel a strange shame when I eat lunch before noon, but I don't know if I've already that's already the anarchist in me.
Yeah, no, I think you've overcome that by having been at home for
Yeah.
quite a while now.
Well, I think I've just always had a weird sleep schedule anyway. So it's like sometimes I don't wake up till 11. So sometimes I have a late an afternoon breakfast, you know? I mean, I don't do that anymore now that I take Darwin to school. Oh my god, I keep saying this.
See,
My child to school.
but you also internalize that by thinking of it as a late breakfast. You still attribute it to some manner of clock time. Still getting you.
Yeah, it all gets us in the end.
Yeah.
The fact that, yeah, so I just said that one. We are time binding animals, as the American economist and social theorist Jeremy Rifkin put it in his 1987 book, Time Wars. All of our perceptions of self and world are mediated by the way we imagine, explain, use, and implement time. I will say, though, Jeremy Rifkin is a bit of a not great person. Not great.
Okay.
He's there's a great article in one of Stephen Jay Gould's books where he criticizes Jeremy Rifkin's like lack of comprehension in terms of biology, uh, which is really good. He's also had some like other weird, like he had a book on like abolishing work that like, or the end of jobs or something. I can't remember the exact title, but like it was released. I want to say it was released in like the 90s, and it was like it made like a big landing thing, and then pretty much all of his prognostications in it were wrong. He has a history of making prognostications that do not come true. I'll just put it to that. The End of Work, which was in 1995, which was the decline of the global labor force and the dawn of the post-market era. I do not feel like we're in a post-market.
Sure.
I mean that.
Can't blame a guy for being optimistic.
Yeah. Anyways, I have there was a time when like a lot of he was in a lot of like left wing documentaries. He felt like one of those kind of like a left wing grifter that a lot of people threw in their documentaries. And so I mean, and the thing here about time wars, all of our perceptions of self and world are mediated by the way we imagine, explain, use, and implement time. Like, there's nothing about this that I would call into question just because it's associated with him. I just wanted to point out that he's not always been great. That's all. During the COVID-19 pandemic, many people reported that their experience of time had become warped and weird. Being trapped at home or laboring unusually excessive hours made days feel like hours and hours like minutes, while some months felt endless and others passed almost without notice. It seemed the time in our clocks and the time in our minds had drifted apart. It, I don't know if you feel this way. Like, I do feel that a lot of people were conversing about this topic, about like time dilation or the sense of time uh, going fast or slow, being in pandemic. But
Mhm.
I've always just like I don't know if I've just always been a more contemplative person about like philosophical nuances like this, but time has always felt that way to me. Uh, but there was something definitely about the pandemic though that for me mostly felt dragging while living it, but like almost like it went by so fast upon reflection, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And in part because I
I mean,
feel like
nothing really happened for a year.
yes, and so it's like that's why it feels faster, but only on reflection, because then you realize like so little happened that it's like you can recount it more in a sense, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, it kind of gets into this in the next paragraph, it looks like.
Courses, I finally started having dreams again, so thanks, COVID, I guess. Uh, March, April, and May were really off as far as time. Yeah, I even reflect on just the fact that it's been 2 years of this. It's gonna be the 2 year anniversary coming up. Like it's just weird.
Mhm.
Academic studies explored how our emotions, such as pandemic induced grief and anxiety, could be distorting our perceptions of time. Or maybe it was just because we weren't moving around and experiencing much change. After all, time is change, as Aristotle thought. What is changeless is timeless. But rarely did the clock itself come into question, the very thing we use to measure time, the drumbeat against which we defined weird distortions. The clock continued to log its rigid seconds, minutes, and hours, utterly unaware of the global crisis that was taking place. It was stable, correct, neutral, and absolute. I wonder if it's going to get into like the calendar stuff. Like I love the history as well about the Gregorian calendar and how they had to add leap years.
Hmm.
Like
I honestly can't remember if it did or not.
it feels rigid and absolute, but it really isn't. Or at least we don't measure it precisely as rigidly, which is why we have to add an extra day every once in a while to sort of make it work.
Yeah.
But what makes us wrong and the clock right? For most people, the last class they had devoted to clocks and time was early in primary school. Kevin Berth, a professor of anthropology at the University of New York, who has been studying clocks for more than 30 years, told me recently.
Fuck yeah.
Like, can you imagine that, like, 30 years, all you've been studying is clocks? There's this thing that is.
Kevin Birth is gonna.
Go on.
I hope he changes his name like whenever he's ancient to like
Kevin Berth.
Kevin Born or Kevin Death. Like,
So Kevin says there's this thing that is central to our entire society that's built into all of our electronics, and we're wandering around with an early primary school level of knowledge about it. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, there's some like stuff is taught in like physics and philosophy, but I guess it depends on like who's going to be taking those courses. Probably not as many people. So I guess I
mhm.
Birth is one of a growing chorus of philosophers. Oh yeah, hell yeah, Kevin. Way to get into my trade. Well, actually, I don't know if he no because he's an anthropologist. Never mind. Birth is a growing chorus of philosophers, social scientists, authors, and artists who, for various reasons, are arguing that we need to urgently reassess our relationship with the clock. The clock, they say, does not measure time; it produces it. Coordinated time is a mathematical construct, not the measure of a specific phenomenon, Birth wrote in his book, Objects of Time. That mathematical construct has been shaped over centuries by science, yes, but also power, religion, capitalism, and colonialism. I mean, this is true for like most social constructs, and I think it's something that a lot of people uh, miss, which is that it's like race is a social construct, but that doesn't mean that like it didn't arise out of like uh, physical properties such as skin color, right? It's just what you derive from that it starts getting problematic. But there is something out there that allowed for this social construct to exist, and the construct itself exists as well. So it's like time is
Yeah.
real insofar as that we all talk about time, even if it's shaped by
I
all
mean,
this other.
I think that sometimes people get like caught up in it because it's like social constructs are also social reality type of thing. Like just because it is constructed doesn't mean that it is unreal, I guess.
Yeah, but it also doesn't mean that like because often people want to like sort of like separate, which I don't necessarily think this is the greatest move either. But people want to separate like reality out there with like the things in our mind. So social constructs, since they rely on minds, are more of like a mental thing as opposed to like relying on things out there. And all I'm getting at is like sometimes even though like the connection between what is in here and out there isn't like necessarily one to one. Of course, like the Earth does rotate around the sun. There's some, and of course, you know, we are born and then grow old and die. So like time is like I think what is being like sort of captured in this sentence is saying like yes, there are like things out there that give us a sense of what this thing is, but then it is also shaped by the sort of like power relations and how other people want to capture our time. And I think capitalism is one of the more
Jody,
important parts.
I appreciate you taking a brave stance in favor of heliocentrism,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
acknowledging that the
did I
Earth
screw
does in
up?
fact go around the sun. Huh?
The Earth does go around the sun, does it not? Did I say
Yeah,
that
no,
wrong?
you were right. I was applauding you for it.
Yeah, but that's still not heliocentrism. Well, I guess it is heliocentrism. I don't know. My brain's not working right now. I was thinking you were like trying to slight me because like maybe we actually rotate. all of us rotate again with our black hole, which is then part of the Milky Way. So it's even
Nope, that's not
heliocentrism is
true.
kind of wrong. That's not true. It's all false.
Nope, all goes around the sun.
The clock is extremely useful as a social tool that helps us coordinate ourselves around the things we care about, but it is also deeply politically charged. And like anything political, it benefits some, marginalizes others, and blinds us from a true understanding of what is really going on. Secret time thief, though. It's really
Yeah.
the more we synchronize ourselves with the time in clocks, the more we fall out of sync with our own bodies and the world around us. Borrowing a term from the environmentalist Bill McKibben, Michelle Bastian, a senior lecturer at Edinburgh University and editor of the academic journal Time and Society, has argued that clocks have made us fatally confused about the nature of time. In the natural world, the movement of hours or weeks do not matter. Thus, the buildup of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, the sudden extinction of species that have lived on the earth for millions of years, the rapid spread of viruses, the pollution of our soil and water, the true impact of all of this is beyond our realm of understanding because of our devotion to a scale of time and activity relevant to nothing except humans. It's an interesting way of conceptualizing climate change. I mean, like, there is a sense in which it's a problem that, I mean, I would argue now that it's in the present, but when they were first like talking about it, it was a problem like later. And given the sort of like power dynamics involved in time, you know, where it's like we got, I gotta be on time today, go to work, crunch those numbers, and like totally miss the fact of maybe we should have been doing things back then to deal with the thing later on.
Yeah.
During an era in which social constructs like race, gender, and sexuality are being challenged and dismantled, hell yeah, the true nature of clock time has somehow escaped the attention of wider society. Much like has happened with money, the clock has come to be seen as the thing it was only supposed to represent. The clock has become time itself. I think the funny thing is, I think part of it too is are in terms of like what makes time a bit lasting, or at least I feel like has more of a staying power even than money in a certain circumstance, is that there is a very social use to it. In that, if I were to be like, let's meet at this time, that is very socially useful. Uh, I mean, other
I
things come
mean,
along with it. I just feel like that is a strong reason for why it persists beyond.
see, I don't think that that's it at all, though. Like, I think that that is a thing that was found later in terms of like, you have the like because when clock time was invented, it's not like everybody had clocks in their houses. It's not like, there weren't batteries. The like wind up type ones would have been extremely expensive for the vast majority of people. So like even then, like that would have been, you're relying on looking up at the sun and being able to like tell what time in the solar day it is for you more, and then like the more social constructions around like church life and them ringing the bells there type of thing to measure when time is. And it's not like people wouldn't. The idea that clock time is the only possible means of measuring like when things might occur is also part of that like internalization of the importance of clock time. Like if you think about yeah, like if you think about like any like most societies were before clocks were very very good at like just astronomy type shit where like you look up at the stars, you can kind of get a sense of direction from them. You look at the sun, you can get a sense of like how long until the sun goes up or it's noon or whatever. Like there is a different relation that comes out of clock time that kind of divorces you from the actual world around you, and instead you kind of just internalize that, like, 3 p.m. is this, when like 3 p.m. is nothing, you know.
Yeah,
um
I don't think you're wrong. I'm just saying, like, as much as it's a construct, it's an element of precision. I do agree. Like in the past, even when you had clocks starting to come around, as you're saying, like not everyone had like a wristwatch or whatever. So it's like even then you'll be like, let's meet up at the bushes around like seemingly when the sun is at this point in the sky, and we'll like figure it out, kind of thing, you know. But it's a way of just like
mhm.
precision. Like when I tell people to come watch the stream at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, then they know to come at this specific time. Like I'm not starting like an hour later or an hour earlier. Uh, and that precision makes things like, I guess, handier even outside of the context of I guess the more like rigid systems of capitalism and stuff like this, right? It's just a way of just like adding precision, and that can have benefits. It can also have drawbacks, which I think is like the one takeaway from this that I think is I agree with in this article.
Yeah, like, yeah, on some level I agree. Like, I think that at most it should only ever be used for, I don't know, it's difficult, right? Because like the advantage of back in the day is that there wasn't really that much of a need for precision
Yeah,
because there wasn't that fucking much else going on.
yeah.
Like,
No, there's
oh, meet me by the bushes at by 3 bong in the
yeah,
afternoon, and like,
because you had the time to
you
sit and
know,
wait. You know.
yeah, like it's not like you got anything else to do. You're just like sitting there like
Yeah,
smoking or like
yeah,
drinking a cup of tea, being like, oh well, he'll show up when he shows up. Guess I'll put up my feet on these like tombstones or whatever and just chill till he shows up. And like,
yeah,
that sounds way better to me than like fucking, be here at 7 p.m. Like, the fuck does that mean?
yeah. No, I mean that's why like I agree. Like there's things surrounding the precision that I do think are like worth criticizing to a certain extent. Like the fact that we are so beholden to a lot of like time sensitive stuff that it makes our days much more stressful and controlled by it's very controlling in that you have this like rigid structure of you need to be here at this time and you need to be here at this time, kind of thing. Uh,
Yeah. And
but
I
I
think
mean,
it
like if you could have
also
both,
goes into like,
you know, free up some
yeah,
of those
like
spaces, but then also be like, we're all meeting here at this time, and then
that's the thing. Like, it's not just the clock, obviously. It's the clock plus capitalism plus et cetera, where it's like, if you are only thinking of existence within a short-term thing, and it's a lot easier to justify kind of like rushing and precision and schedules and planning and blah 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 blah. Whereas like, there is a conceivable world in which we still keep clock time, but also just like fucking chill about it
yeah,
and don't, you know, care that much. Like,
yeah, no,
you know,
and part of it, like, because
there
I
is no reason for so much of the rush and bustle, and that also like helps bring back our perception of time to like the immediate term rather than anything extended over lifetimes even.
and I'm sure we're gonna get to it. I mean, like, there's times when I care about time, and yet I wish that I didn't. In that, like, I have to be at a certain place where the office is gonna close, and then, like, you know what I mean. And then that stresses me the fuck out. And, like, yeah. So there's like the other elements of our society that make time the issue that it is. Nam says, isn't the issue of
Hmm.
time more to do with how it is used and controlled by capitalists to control the working class, and not time in and of itself? I need to know when my shows are on.
Your shows on the idiot tube are capitalism though.
Yeah, I mean, but there's an interest of like this is what I was getting at. Even if it's casual to like a show, there's something about perceiving a show live or just experiencing something live. Because the other thing that's like neat about YouTube or these kind of things is it kind of like abolishes the need to like watch it immediately because you can technically watch it whenever you want to, right? It's on the tube. Um,
Yeah. Oh, and like I think a lot of streaming has kind of divorced most of those from when things are actually doing. And also like with live events, when the fuck have those ever started on time anyways? Like, come on.
yeah.
Don't kid yourself.
No, I mean like even classes. I remember there would be times too where the prof will like wait an extra 5 minutes for people to show up. yeah. But I mean that's why it's like I think there's an element in which like having the time does have use so that people know this is roughly around when it's going to begin. But then there's norms around the strict adherence to it that I think we're hitting on that causes the distress and makes time more uh, tyrannical in line with this article.
Hmm.
I will continue though. Clock time is not what most people think it is. It is not a transparent reflection of some sort of true and absolute time that scientists are monitoring. It was created and is frequently altered and adjusted to fit social and political purposes. Daylight savings, for instance, is an arbitrary thing we made up. I know. The funny thing is, daylight savings was literally the other day, and I didn't even notice it. Didn't even notice.
Oh, really?
It was like Saturday, wasn't it?
Saturday night, yeah.
Yeah.
So like Sunday was our first day of it.
And I gained an hour and didn't even notice. uh, so is the 7 day week. People tend to think that somewhere there is some master clock, like the rod of platinum in the Bureau of Weights and Measures. That is the Uber clock, Kurt told me. There isn't. It's calculated. There is no clock on Earth that gives the correct time, especially the week stuff. I will say too. There was a good interview on Majority Report today. I can't remember the person's name. Here, let me Google it. And the premise of the interview was about how like our 5 day work week is a bunch of made up bullshit. And so it's the case for a
Hmm.
shorter work week with Dr. Will Strong,
Have you
Stronge.
have you ever looked at those like calendars of like French peasants and whatever, where because they got Sundays off for sure, they got All Saints feast days off, they got like all the major holidays off, they got most of winter off, and like all of that sort of stuff, where it's like the amount of time they have off way outnumbers anything that most like minimum wage type workers have nowadays.
So what
Um,
you're saying is we should return to the monarchy?
we were better as serfs, I gotta say. I
I
was my
disagree.
ancestors were better when Sweden was invading and Christianizing us.
oh my god. I mean, maybe on this one aspect, sure, but like, I mean, I guess at least clocks brought us modern medicine. We got to live a little bit longer.
See,
Uh,
but that's mostly because of infant mortality. So that's the main thing that we've driven down. The actual like age that we live to hasn't gone up if we survive childhood all that much. So really, they weren't doing too bad, you know?
no, I mean, some of them,
Just
a
don't
lot
get
of
an
people
infection.
were still dying off past childbirth. We definitely live longer than we did.
It's not as significant as you would think, though. It's not nearly as much.
Well, go back and get cholera, and you tell me. All right.
Okay, it current keep existing and get hit by a car. They didn't have
Or
those back
COVID
then.
19.
Like, yeah, like there are dangers that exist now that also weren't around then, just like there are dangers that were then that don't exist now
Sure.
or aren't as present now. You know? Like,
Fair.
I could die in a German peasants' revolt. It would be so nice.
Yeah, but at least now we have airbags and chemotherapy. All right. What?
No, get get rid of airbags. Chemo, I guess we can take, but I don't know. Mixed bag.
An airbag. I was gonna say an airbag saved my life, and then I just realized that that's a Radiohead lyric. But, yeah, I got in a car accident once and had the airbag to play. I don't know that it saved my life, but I didn't die, so that going on. What's usually taught in Western schools is that the time in our clock, and by extension our calendars, is determined by the rotation of the Earth and thus the movement of the sun across our sky. The Earth, we learn, completes an orbit of the Sun in 365 days, which determines the length of our year, and it rotates on its axis once every 24 hours, which determines our day. Thus, an hour is 1/24th of this rotation, a minute is 1/60th of an hour, and a second is 1/60th of a minute. None of this is true. Yes, I already sort of mentioned it. The Earth is not a perfect
Yeah,
sphere with perfect movement. It's a lumpy round mass, an oblate spheroid, for those who are wanting to be too technical. The lumpy,
sure.
I mean, lumpy round mass or oblate spheroid. I don't know. You decide what sounds cooler. That is squashed at both poles and wobbles. It does not rotate in exactly 24 hours each day or orbit the sun in exactly 365 days each year. It just kind of does. It just kind of does. All right. Perfectionism, man-made
So it
concept.
doesn't precisely do.
Yeah,
It's just like
kind of does.
it's kind of close, you know? It's around there. Give or take a bit.
Oh god. I'm a trader. I love daily showers and flush. Yeah.
See,
Uh,
I will admit that those ones are a little bit more fair. Um, Although I don't think anybody would notice how stinky they were. And also, like, a lot of places still valued bathing and had, like, accessible baths. Flush toilets, that's a little bit iffier, though.
I mean, I'm still under the impression that most people today don't know how stinky they are, in part because we desensitize to our own sort of stank. I always wonder that about myself, or especially like I wonder about it more in terms of the smell of my home, because cats and kids, like a bunch of weird smells mixing together. Kitty litter, the daughter pooping everywhere. So it's like
Hmm.
and like I'm used to it because I'm here like 24/7 breathing it all in that I don't even notice it. And then I wonder if like new people enter the home, how strong or unstrong it is. Like it's hard for me to assess. So I think a lot of people walk around thinking they don't stink when they really do. Now whether you should feel shame about that or not, I personally don't care. I'm streamer
Hmm.
shades. All right, there you go, Nick. Just for you. Just for you. Go on, Vienna. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, you'll be able to read a bit easier. Less squinting.
Less squinting. Ugh. My eyes are just off. I went. Speaking of time and how oppressive it is, I went to bed really late last night. I just couldn't sleep, and then my children had just decided that they were going to wake up at like 6 or 7, and then spent the entire morning running like from one end of our house to the other and back, and screaming and giggling the whole time, and which meant that I'm not sleeping anymore. And then I had to drive my son to school because time requires of it. And
Hmm.
yeah, I am super sleep deprived. I did have an afternoon nap, but it was only for like 40 minutes. Dark mode should be mandatory, like vaccines. No, I'm not. Here's a weird. This might be a weird thing about me. Not a huge fan of dark mode. Not a huge fan. I don't know what it is. I love the blinding glare of white screen. I don't know why. What you gonna do? I will continue. For thousands of years, most human societies have accepted and moved in harmony with the irregular rhythms of nature, using the sun, moon, and stars to understand the passage of time. One of the most common early timekeeping devices, sundials, or shadow clocks, reflective. Shadow clock sounds way cooler than sundial. Why have I never heard that before?
Yeah, it does sound cool.
The hours of the day were not of fixed 60-minute lengths but variable. Hours were longer or shorter as they waxed and waned in accordance with the Earth's orbit, making the days feel shorter in the winter and longer in the summer. These clocks didn't determine the hours, minutes, and seconds themselves, they simply mirrored their surrounding environment and told you where you were within the cyclical rhythms of nature. But since the 14th century, we've gradually been turning our backs on nature and increasingly calculating our sense of time via man made devices. I mean, they're probably going to get to it, but I wonder if part of this is an issue with globalism.
Jody, your audio is being really weird.
What do you mean?
So you mean
weird?
globalization, not globalism. It sounds like
Globalist.
choppy.
Does anyone in the chat is my voice?
Like it sounds choppy over Twitch. You're fine over Discord. But Nam was saying, yeah. Nam was saying that here it's static, and then Grimpy said, there it is again. And then I muted on here and turned it up, and I could hear it as well.
Did it just
a little
start?
Bit strange.
Did it just start, or has it been doing it this whole time? And is it better now? I moved my mic. I don't know if that helped or hurt. I was thinking maybe my mic might have been hitting the computer and therefore was buzzing or something, but just started. Well, let me know. Maybe I'll turn myself down a bit. Am I too quiet, or I just adjusted a little? So no. All right. Well, let me know if it's unbearable, and so stay on me, chat. If it's unbearable, I'll try some more fixes. But I didn't change a thing. For a couple patches, there were a static scratch, nothing unbearable. Okay, that's good. Globalism. Globalization. Yeah. It began in the monasteries of northern and central Europe, where pious monks built crude iron objects that unreliably but automatically struck intervals to help bell ringers keep track of canonical hours of prayer. So it was God's fault. Well, there you go. Always God's fault. Like any machine, the logic of the mechanical clock was based upon regularity, the rigid ticking of an escapement. It brought with it a whole different way to view time, not as a rhythm determined by a combination of various observed natural phenomena, but as a homogeneous series of perfectly identical intervals provided by one source, and that source was God. Honestly, though, it's very interesting the extent to which Christianity, especially, warped our sense of nature, or tried to like perfect nature in various ways. That is a very interesting topic.
Yeah. Yeah, and also just like colonialism. My favorite factoid is still like the reason that we have European starlings in North America, which cause an estimated like $6 billion worth of crop damage every year, is because some dickhead wanted to have every bird mentioned in Shakespeare in New York City in like the 1600s. And so he brought over every bird mentioned in Shakespeare and just released them.
Even yeah, I'm still blown away by the earthworm story that you told me. I had no clue that earthworms were not endemic to at least our part of Canada.
Our area of
And Core, I saw you talking about the bird discourse, big bird discourse, and as I tweeted out earlier yesterday, Big Bird personally administered my vaccine. Just want to throw it out there that I got the jab from Big Bird. There you go. Personally. because Big Bird is awesome. It is on with what you're saying though. It is amazing how the right wing loses their shit about such innocuous shit like a Muppet on a children's television program told people to get vaccinated and they're crapping their pants. But anyways, back to
Big Bird
religion.
isn't a Muppet.
Sorry, what was that?
I said Big Bird isn't a Muppet.
Is it big? It's Jim Henson still, isn't it?
He's Sesame Street. They're different.
No, but they're Muppets. It's just that it's not. I mean, like Big Bird was in the Muppet movies as a Muppet.
Really?
Yeah.
Am I dumb?
I mean, like it's Big. I mean, Big Bird isn't a part of like the cast of the Muppets, but like they were created by the same people. And Muppets is just a word for like the animatronic puppet things. Muppets.
I don't know
Sesame
about that.
Street is Muppets. Yeah, totally. I agree.
Not Muppets. They're puppets.
Now let's. I'm gonna.
Whatever. I
Now
don't care about
this
branding.
is a very important distinction.
Fuck.
I need to confirm that Big Bird is in fact a Muppet. Big Bird is a Muppet character. There you go. It's right on the Wikipedia. First
Okay.
sentence. Big Bird is a Muppet character.
Sure.
There you go.
Oh, wow, look at Jody. He's right about something for once. Wow.
Listen, though, this is very important. Had me questioning the existence of the Muppets. I mean, Time's arrow goes in only one direction, except on Imperial News. True. On our show, time goes cyclical forever.
Yeah, that one's true.
Spreading a rumor that there's. So I'm just reading this tweet here briefly. Spreading a rumor that there's going to be a Thomas the Tank Engine reboot with a transgender tank engine just for the pleasure of watching conservatives pretend to be passionately dismayed about Thomas the Tank Engine. Yeah, okay. We live in a time. Anyways, we live in a not time actually. Here we go. The religious fervor for rationing time and disciplining one's life around it led the American historian Lewis Mumford of Mumford and Sons.
Yep. The proverbial son.
To describe the Benedictine monks as perhaps the original founders of modern capitalism. Wouldn't surprise me. It is one of the great ironies of Christianity that it set the wheels in motion for an ever unfolding mania of scientific accuracy and precision around timekeeping that would eventually secularize time in the West and divorce God, the original clockmaster, from the picture entirely. I actually think this contradicts an earlier statement of this author, which is that it's not scientifically accurate. Right? It's not based on like the actual rotations of the Earth in this. It's based on their own sort of like rigid structures of when they define when the best time to pray is. You know?
I mean, but it's an ever unfolding mania of scientific accuracy and precision. So it's not saying that it is scientifically accurate or precise. It's saying that it's an obsession with supposed scientific accuracy and supposed precision. Like,
right. I guess if you're saying it like that, where it's not literally scientific accurate and precision, it's just this like obsession with it being that, but then it happens not to be it.
yeah.
Right. By 1656, the Dutch scientist Christian Huygens had invented the first pendulum clock, which delivered homogeneous and regular slices of a small unit of time. Seconds. Unlike the inconsistent mechanical clocks of before, the clock time of pendulums was nearly perfect. That same century, the British astronomer John Flamsteed and others developed mean time,
Yeah.
an average calculation of the Earth's rotation. Science had found a way around the Earth's wobbly eccentricities, producing a quantifiable and consistent unit that became known as Greenwich Mean Time.
Greenwich.
Greenwich.
Right, Nick?
Greenwich. Nick's a little bit busy. Nah, P-wet.
Oh, fuck yeah. I'm jealous. I could go for a pirouette.
Greenwich. Standardized time became vital for seafarers and irresistible to corporate interests. Such was the ease it could offer trade, transport, and electronic communications. See globalism. Globalism.
Mhm.
Globalization.
Yeah.
I don't know why my brain wants to. Maybe it's because I listen to too much Rebel, and so globalist is on
Yeah,
my
you listen to too much.
right with.
You've internalized the right wing terminology too much.
But it took longer to colonize the minds of the general public. During the British railway mania of the 1840s, around 6,000 miles of railway lines were constructed across the country. Investors, including Charles Darwin and John Stuart Mill and the Bronte sisters, climbed over each other to acquire rail company shares in a frenzy of freewheeling capitalism that caused one of the biggest economic bubbles in British history. Companies like Great Western Railway and Midland Railway began to enforce Greenwich Mean Time inside.
Greenwich.
I know, I screwed myself up because I wanted to pronounce the W again. Greenwich Mean
Okay.
Time inside their station and on their trains to make timetables run efficiently. And then we had to wait for the epic novel where Daphne Taggart was racing across America to build railways. You know who Daphne Taggart?
Uh-huh.
Atlas
Nope.
Shrugged. Ayn Rand. The premise of the book
Oh.
Ayn Rand is that Daphne is trying to build like the greatest railway of all time, but then the parasites are stealing all her
Wait.
profits.
No, the book which?
Atlas Shrugged.
Okay. You said the book Ayn Rand, and I had already forgotten which book you were talking about of hers, so.
Atlas Shrugged, which I have read. It is a huge
Damn,
freaking
I
book.
didn't realize Atlas Shrugged is a feminist novel featuring a girl boss.
She does get R worded in it, and likes it. It's very creepy.
Uh,
Yeah, very
uh,
creepy. But I guess she's a girl boss. I mean, here's part of it is it was written by Ayn Rand, so like there's an
yeah,
element of
God.
projection, right? Which is like I'm a woman and I'm pro capitalism, so yeah.
Hmm.
Damn English making us pronounce Whoa, Worcester, Worcester sauce.
Is that it?
It's
How is I don't remember the
I'm pretty sure it's
British
Worcester.
pronunciation.
I don't know if that's the British pronunciation, but that's how like uh
Worcestershire.
Massachusettsans. what, what do you call someone from Massachusetts? Worcester, Worcestershire. Okay, yeah, Worcestershire.
Worcestershire, yeah. Worcester. Worcestershire.
So I got it right. Yeah, no,
Worcestershire.
okay. So it's not just a Massachusetts thing. That's how they pronounced it there. Worcester. Anyways, every city, town, and village in Britain used to set its clocks to its own local solar time, which gave each locale a palpable sense of identity, time, and place. If you lived in Newcastle, noon was when the sun was highest, no matter what the time in London was. But as the railways brought standardized timetables, see, there's that globalization. Local times were demonized
Mm-hmm.
and swept aside. By 1855, nearly all public clocks were set to GMT, or London time, and the country became one time zone. How dare they? The rebellious city of Bristol was one of the last to agree to standardized time. The main town clock on the Corn Exchange building kept a third hand to denote Bristol time. That's amazing, actually. For the local population who refused to adjust, it remains there to this day. That's actually kind of incredible.
Fuck yeah. Go Bristol.
Railway
Hi,
time.
two cars.
Uh, hello, two cars. Railway time arrived.
Worcestershire. Yeah.
Stop trying to pronounce Worcester. Bristol going ape shit. It just reminds like so. This is like a funny anecdote, but my in-laws, I like this is not the case now, but they've told this story to me multiple times. But they were a holdout on the rotary phone, like the one where you had to stick your finger in and turn the thing. Beep, beep. They held out on that until the Bell phone company literally said, "We are no longer allowing rotary phones to hook up to our network. You have to get rid of
Damn.
it." And I don't know why. It's just like weird how some people just get it in their like they're just used to one thing and they're like, I don't want it to change. No change.
Have you heard that story about how farmers used to connect their phone lines to the metal fencing that like would link all the farms all along one way? And so they could all talk to one another, and like you would just pick up the phone and you'd just be able to hear everybody talking, all everybody that's connected.
No, I
And
haven't.
it apparently like really helped with like farmer depression back in the day
Yeah, because it would be like a
because they could
town
finally like
hall.
contact people. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's cool.
Hmm.
Railway time arrived in America too, splitting the country into four distinct time zones and causing protests to flare nationwide. Oh man, if only something like the next iPhone caused this kind of mass demonstration. The Boston Evening Transcript demanded, "Let us keep our own noon." And the Cincinnati Commercial Gazette wrote, "Let the people of Cincinnati stick to the truth as it is written by the sun, moon, and stars." Yes, Cincinnati.
Fuck yeah.
The 1884 International Meridian Conference is often framed as the moment clock time took over the world. The globe was sliced into 24 time zones, declaring different clock times, all synchronized to the time of the most powerful empire, the British and their GMT. Nobody would decipher time from nature anymore. It would be told what time it was by a central authority. The author Clark Blaze has argued that once this was implemented, it didn't matter what the sun proclaimed at all. Natural time was dead.
Hmm.
In
Me
reality,
smacking my fist.
the funny it's real there's an aspect of this article that I find really neat and like the history of all this. But like I'm still not fully on board with this like I can even see like it's helpful to know what times are even internationally that we can all just have some sort of like standard to use to help each other regardless of whether it like fits nature or not. But we'll see if I'm yet to be fully convinced, although like we've already acknowledged
I
that there's
mean,
definitely like oppressive elements to time that I still think need to go.
they are not the ones saying abolish clocks anyways. They're just critiquing
Oh
like the notions of it. I'm the one saying abolish
yeah.
clocks.
My family held out while growing up, but only because we refused to spend money on a phone. Oh, that's fair. That's fair as well. There's a converter to make rotary phones work with touch tone. I wonder if that converter existed back then or if it's something like new. And maybe they just maybe Bell refused to tell them that there was a converter because they just wanted to fuck with them. I don't know. That's also a possibility. In reality, this process had already been taking place throughout the 1800s as a result of European colonialism, imperialism, and oppression. Colonialism was not just a conquest of land and therefore space, but also a conquest of time. From South Asia to Africa to Oceania, imperialists assaulted alternative forms of timekeeping. They saw any region without European style clocks, watches, and church bells as a land without time.
Yeah.
European, yeah, I mean, not much more to say about that. I was gonna say like they did the same thing with their language too, which is English is everywhere.
Mhm.
European global expansion in commerce, transport, and communication was paralleled by and premised upon control over the manner in which societies abroad relate to time. The Australian historian Giordano Nani wrote in his book, The Colonization of Time, the project to incorporate the globe within a matrix of hours, minutes, and seconds demands recognition as one of the most significant manifestations of Europe's universalizing will. Good way of putting it. In short,
Yeah.
if the East India Company was the physical embodiment of British colonialism overseas, GMT was the metaphysical embodiment. That's colonialism. Colonial.
Hmm.
The Western separation of clock time from the rhythms of nature helped imperialists establish superiority over other cultures. When British colonizers swept into southeastern Australia in search of gold, they depicted the timekeeping practices of the indigenous societies they encountered as irregular and unpredictable, in contrast to the rationale and linear nature of the clock. This actually, in tandem with this, reminds me of how the Indian Act was set up in Canada in terms of how it constructed uh, the band cancels and stuff like this, which was the idea of like other forms of government are irregular, so therefore we will have to shape you in our own image in order for us to even begin to engage with you.
Yeah. And no, there are sorry. Australia and Canada also only recognize indigenous people as like legally human in like the 50s and 60s. So there are similarities between the two for sure.
Well, I mean, there's obviously similarities in terms of us being colonizer countries, but then also just the contrast between it wasn't just time that they did this for. It was like language,
Yeah.
governance, like all this stuff. Basically, be exactly like us. It's a giant homogenization force. This was despite the fact that indigenous societies in the region had advanced forms of timekeeping based on the moon, stars, rains, the blossoming of certain trees and shrubs, and the flowering of tides, which they used to determine the availability of food and resources, distance, and calendar dates. 19th century Europeans generally conceived of such closeness to nature as calling into question the very humanity of those who practice. I mean, there's an element in which this is like weird in that, like, I mean, like, obviously we've already gotten in this article that like it started to move away from the natural elements of timekeeping, but the original sort of conception that has like the lineage that we've derived from comes from sun, the earth, and the rotations and all that like stuff, right? So like a lot of the, I know there's like some variations of indigenous uh numeracy. I don't know necessarily like how it involved like time and stuff like this, but I know some of like the numeracy involved like more natural elements in which like some of the number names didn't reflect exact quantities but had to do with like certain natural scenery stuff. So like the word mountain, which meant like big and large, encompassed like a large number of things and stuff like this. Uh, I can't remember the exact indigenous culture that had that. I just remember this from reading books on language. And so my point just being is that like it's like weird that like yeah, of course, even even our own time, even though it ended up in the English's hands, derived itself from some natural concept. So like, why would that make them inherently, I guess, like less human? You know, if anything, it makes them human, just like all. Nani wrote,
Mhm.
this was
So much
partially.
of it's about
Sorry about that.
the separation of like, humans are somehow unnatural or more than
Like animals.
natural or you know
I mean,
yeah.
like we.
But like you can see that in the Romans, you can see that in
Yeah,
like a lot of like you can see that in imperial systems more than anything. Like
no, that's fair.
it isn't just, a Christian thing, but it was certainly exacerbated and kind of perfected by them. It's also like, like it's kind of a Oh, God, I forget where I was going with this. Fuck. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
in order to be human, you have to be separate from nature. Like that is kind of a key part of modernity in a lot of ways. Like it's just the sort of so-called separation as if we are somehow not animals, also just like performing complex rituals in order to have food and have a like social system that takes care of us is like, I don't know. We like to pretend that we're more than we are.
yep, yep. I mean, again, the one time when I was like, I should write a book, it's going to be called Against Nature. We should just abolish the concept. I mean, if we're going to abolish concepts, we're getting rid of time and we're getting rid of nature. Nature as a concept needs to go.
Did we read that article?
No, we didn't. We
I know that
should.
I
We
shared it for
should.
the podcast that one
I
time.
don't remember
Yeah,
how
okay.
long it is, but yeah, I remember that one being. I can't remember the title. If you remember what it is,
Yeah. I'll try to find it. It's definitely in my bookmarks.
but it had to do with uh yeah, I can't remember. I do remember having this conversation with you, and I remember that article. But remind us when you find it. Remind us what the article is. I will continue.
Yeah.
This was partly determined by the fact that Enlightenment values. So I'm guessing this is what Nick was getting at in the chat there. Enlightenment values and ideals had come to associate the idea of humanness with man's transcendence and domination over nature. Yeah, exactly. And its corresponding opposite, savagery as a mode of life that existed closer to nature. The funny thing is, it's amazing to me, or not amazing to me, but like the people who sort of like adopted like the Enlightenment language today that Nick is getting at, these like boomers, tend tended at least to originate from like the atheist community and like the secular community, and yet really it's just like an extension of like Christian norms that I don't think are accurate. And now it's being
Um,
adopted by people like Progress U and all that other bullshit that peddles this crap. Were you gonna
the
say?
article was The Myth of a Wilderness Without Humans.
Yes.
Yes.
Wait, are we switching to Swatch Internet time? I guess maybe. Do you want to?
Yes.
Tell us on
I
Swatch
don't know what that
Internet
is,
time.
but yes, we're doing that.
It's something that someone like Stephen Fry always likes to talk about. Yeah, I mean, because like they like to appeal to this idea of like somehow the European old dead white philosophers had already said everything that needs to be said, and we need to go back to that.
Okay, I've thought of it. What if we get rid of time zones, but keep time on the internet? Everything else done.
I say we just get rid of capitalism, and then time will just be used to hold fun activities. You know. Anyways, in Melbourne, churches and
Yeah.
railway stations grew quickly on the horizon, bringing with them the hands, faces, bells, and general cacophony of clock time. Cacophony cacophony of clock time. By 1861, a time ball was installed in the Williamstown Lighthouse, and then moved to New York City, where it drops every New Year's now. And Melbourne was officially synchronized to Greenwich Mean Time. British colonizers attempted to integrate indigenous peoples into their labor force with unsatisfactory results. Timekeeping. They did not believe in meaningless toil and obedience to the clock, wrote the Australian sociologist Mike Donaldson. To them, time was not a tyrant. Fascinating.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I stand in solidarity with that for sure. In some parts of Australia, the indigenous resistance to Western clock time continued defiantly. In 1977, in the tiny town of Pukacha, then known as Ernabella, A giant revolving electronically operated clock was constructed near the town center for the local um, Pitjan
Hit,
Pitjanchachara.
hit John Chachara. Pincha Chachara. Yeah. Yeah, that one's I'll admit that one's a difficult one.
It's the the TJ combinations that really threw me off. People to coordinate their lives around. A decade later, a white construction worker at a town council meeting noted that the clock had been broken for months. Nobody had noticed because nobody looked at it. Hell yeah.
That's
The,
so great.
the funny thing is, like, I've had like office experiences like that. Like, I've had some offices that are like very regimented. And then there's others where like every clock in every room was broken and no one knew what time it was. And I have to say, the
That's
one where
also pretty great.
no one knew what time it was, and this was the Waterloo University of Waterloo philosophy department. None of their clocks worked. No one knew what fucking time it was ever, and no one cared. And it was great.
See?
Yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic. I did read that. Two Car says instead of hours and minutes, the mean solar day is divided into 1,000 parts called beats. Each beat is equal to 1 decimal minute in the French Revolutionary Decimal Time System and lasts 1 minute and 26.4 seconds, 86.4 seconds in Standard Time. Times are notated as a three-digit number out of 1,000 after midnight. So, for example, at 2:48 would indicate a time 248 beats after midnight, representing 248 thousandths of a day, just over 5 hours and 57 minutes. There are no time zones in Swatch Internet Time. Instead, the new time scale of Beale Mean Time (BMT) is used. That sounds way too fucking complicated, too, cars. That sounds like a
Yeah.
worse problem.
No, that does
Like,
sound
I
worse.
feel like you've exacerbated what we're experiencing now. You're going to bed, Nick. Well, have a good night. Have a good night, Nicholas. I'm surprised that Tech Bro University was like that.
That's what I was kind of thinking about too.
What, that Tech Bro University had Swatch time?
No, that Waterloo, like the
Oh,
University of Waterloo, didn't have functioning clocks.
well,
Like,
we were the philosophy department. The University of Waterloo's philosophy department was not big to begin with. We were kept in a corner. I think there was only like
yeah.
10 like full time faculty members. Like, it was a small department, but that's where my last official degree comes from. Masters of Philosophy at the University of Waterloo.
Wow.
Yep. It was fine, but yes, it was very tech centric. Otherwise, in terms of like the engineering, for sure was the bigger department on campus.
BlackBerry.
Yeah, I get so a devastating story about BlackBerry too is my wife worked at a placement agency that staffed a lot of BlackBerry people, and on the
Mm-hmm.
day that BlackBerry's basically stock plummeted and their sales decreased, it was her job to basically fire everyone, and then she got let go.
Wow.
So fuck BlackBerry. That's how I feel
Motto of
about
the
them.
story is don't fire everybody.
Why? I mean, like, someone had to do it. I mean, like, technically, venture
No,
capitalists,
BlackBerry would
everyone
still
had
be
to.
a successful company
Yeah.
if Rachel, if if she hadn't
So she
fired people, BlackBerry would still be around.
she didn't work for BlackBerry though. Like, she worked at a placement agency, so she fired all the temp workers. And then it was her
Yeah.
company, not BlackBerry, that fired her, but she didn't know that she was going to be on the cutting room floor. But basically, because they lost all that money, they had to, because BlackBerry fucked them over.
See, no, no. If the temp workers would have unionized and
No,
BlackBerry would be a worker co-op by now.
well, sure. sure, in a perfect world, Jody must be interrogated to confirm fealty to the revolution. We must guard against the tech bros and their mentality. Listen, the
I can confirm Jody does not know enough about technology to be a tech bro, so we're safe in that regard.
yep. Oh my god. Again, it's true. I mean, like, God, I was a part of the communist club back on University of Waterloo's campus too, and
Wait, what?
it was all just a handful of arts grads, yeah, or not grads,
Which
mostly
communist club? Was it Fight Back? Who was it?
Oh, I don't even think Fight Back was around back then. We're talking like
Really?
I don't know, maybe it was, but it was just it was the communist club on campus. That's all it was. It wasn't associated with any party or anything like that. We just sat around like
That's
chatting
so
about
weird.
communism. And if you want to think that it's weird, I was way more of a I want to say more closer to a sock den back then. Probably closer to a sock den back then. And a lot of the communists hated me. And I actually think part of it too was they made themselves more obtuse than they need to be. I was pretty close to being convinced, and they could have done a better job at it. But that being said, I probably was annoying back then as well. Can't blame them too much. But I was still of the mindset of like I'm like flirting with communism, but I'm like I don't know. What about some capitalism?
Solidarity with the Communist Club in their struggle against Jody's revisionism. Uh,
Hey, I came around eventually. I'm just saying they could have been they could have the thing is they were they were a very like the way I would describe it, it was more of like a social clique. And so they didn't want to be my friend, which is fine. They don't have to be my
aw, poor Jody.
friend. Ever read the Marxist Leninist Party platform? I swear to God, they're a bunch of 1800s larpers. I mean, but like that's the thing is
We
they
need to.
tell
I want to
us
start covering the different parties in Canada. Like,
my biggest so here's I remember now what like my biggest objection was to this club was that I would come to them with questions that I thought were sincere questions. And rather than them like answering any of my questions ever, it was always and like I realize now as well like that can be really annoying. So like I don't I don't hold it completely against them because I'm sure I was an annoying like question person. But that being said, their response was always like, read this like 32-page pamphlet from this like underground communist network that we found on like the internet. Which I mean, we're doing some of that now, kind of, but like part of it is like bringing that to the people. Like having somebody snobbily like throw literature at you constantly is not like the way to like convince someone. I had to eventually go on my own terms and start digging through literature before I start coming around. You know? It just it feels kind of like I
mhm.
feel like if someone
See,
asks you that question, you should go through at least some of the motions of going. Well, here's like to sum this article. I'll give you a brief overview, but like if you want a more in depth understanding, go read the article, kind of thing. You know.
true. You must do exactly as Lenin did, because it worked out so well.
Well, I don't even like. I honestly would never read the shit because they would like send me to this random blog from somewhere, and I'm just like, how do I even know that this is a good source? I know nothing.
I wanna, I wanna know what blogs they were sending
I
you
know
to.
I
I
can't
wanna
even
read those
remember. Like,
blogs so bad.
I can't even remember
Oh,
the questions I was asking. I mean,
yeah.
this is like this would have been over 10 years ago.
Yeah, and like I can't imagine the sites are still up and everything. It
Yeah,
sucks. Fuck, we need to like start archiving. Oh, okay. Because like I still want to go over the Parti Communiste Révolutionnaire, Revolutionary Communist Party split at some point in a stream. And like we need to start archiving those web pages before the like three different websites that are up right now. Still.
well, if we want it, we can
3
do.
years after the initial split. are still up.
We can see if you finally get the research in it on order and want us or even lead us through what was with the Maoist party collapse or whatever or the kerfuffle.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
and then
Yeah.
yeah, come with your you. Then you can direct us through a Monday episode. Lead us
Yeah,
along.
no, I want to. It's just I'm waiting because some people on Twitter said that they were going to release um a thing explaining the decision for the main until like a couple days ago, the main supposedly existing faction, the like more legitimate faction that just dissolved. They were going to release a article or something about that decision because they said that the statement confirming their dissolution was like a unprincipled and like a bunch of other like Maoist bullshit. And like I gotta wait till that's out before we can like get into the full thing so that we have like a kind of ending point that works out. And I
Sweet.
also want to find if some of the other factions have blogs or websites going still. I think that the Quebec Turf faction does have one, but then we'll need to go through French, and that'll be a whole thing.
Nom says I'm still on the path myself, although I am an anti-capitalist per se. Uh, Being told to read impenetrable text is a drag. I think that was the part of it too. Was that they would send? I think I did read like one or two of them, and just it gets to the point of just like I I, I don't even understand the surrounding context to know what particular arguments are being had in these things they were sending me to, and in that case, it's like, how is this helping me on the journey? I don't know, but I'm also a lot more open. I mean, it's one of these things that's hard to assess because I understand some like aversion to want to like help people on the way in terms of like, if someone's a fascist, there's no point on fucking like working on them, and even liberals to some extent, they get really fucking frustrating very fast. I get it. But like I was pretty close to where they were. Like I hadn't gotten there, but like I don't know. Just like those are the people, especially where it's like having a little bit more of like a helping hand to guide people into that sort of like intellectual journey is a way better way of approaching it rather than just being like, "Why you ask such stupid questions? Read this like blog post." Anyways, children.
Mhm.
The movement towards standardized time reached its apex in the 1950s when atomic clocks were judged to be better timekeepers than the Earth itself. The second, as a unit of time, was redefined not as a fraction of the Earth's orbit around the Sun, but as a specific number of oscillations of cesium atoms inside an atomic clock. And also, whatever Two Cars was saying earlier. When you look at precision timekeeping, it's all about insulating and isolating these clocks from responding to anything that goes on around them. Bastian told me via a video call from her home in Edinburgh. A poster with the words, "A clock that falls asleep," hung on the wall behind her. You have to keep them separate from temperature, fluctuations, humidity, even quantum gravity effects. They can't respond to anything. Over 400 atomic clocks in laboratories around the world count time using the atomic second as their standard. A weighted average of these times is used to create international atomic time, which forms the basis of coordinated universal time. UTC isn't completely non-responsive. Every few years, a leap second is added to it to keep it reasonably close to the rotations of the Earth. But in 2023, at the World Radio Communication Conference, nations from around the world will discuss whether it is in our best interest to abolish leap seconds and permanently unmoor ourselves from the sun and moon in favor of time we manufactured ourselves. Dear Lord.
See, I hate it. I hate this.
I mean, but this is the same shit with the Gregorian calendar bullshit and how like
Yeah.
adding leap years and like it's just amazing, like fixated on like how do we socially construct these systems in ways that we feel better. It's just weird, so weird.
Yeah.
It's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism, wrote the literary critic Frederick Jameson. One of the hardest elements to imagine is what capitalism has done to our perception of time via clock. It now seems embedded into our very psychology to view time as a commodity that can be spent or wasted. Capitalism did not create clock time or vice versa, but the scientific and religious divisions of time into identical units established a useful infrastructure for capitalism to coordinate the exploitations and conversion of bodies, labor, and goods into value. Yep. Clock time.
Mm-hmm.
British sociologist Barbara Adam has argued connected time to money. Time could become commodified, compressed, and controlled, she wrote in her book Time. These economic practices could then be globalized and imposed as the norm the world over. I love this. Reminds me of all those memes of like taking crap on the company dime.
Yeah.
Clock
If my
time.
work had a bidet, but it doesn't, so I'm not doing that there.
Clock time, Adam goes on, is often taken to be not only our natural experience of time, but the ethical measure of our very existence. Even the most natural of processes now must be expressed in clock time in order for them to be validated. Really? Is that why they call bowel movements regular? Our most natural processes are now expressed in time.
Yeah.
Women in particular often find themselves at the wrong end of this arbitrary metric. Unpaid labor such as housework and childcare, which still disproportionately burdens women, seems to slip between the measurements of the clock, whereas the experience of pregnancy is very much under the scrutiny of clock time. Adam quotes a woman's account of her birth giving experience. The woman in labor, forced by the intensity of the contractions to turn all her attentions to them, loses her ordinary intimate contact with clock time. But in the hospital environment, where the natural processes of childbirth has been evaluated and standardized in clock time units, a woman is pressured to follow what Elise Enyen Waller, a professor of midwifery at Swansea University, has called a medicalized birth script. To be honest, that doesn't fit my our own sort of experience with our two children. I mean, we both had our children at like first child I think was 1 a.m. The second was 5 a.m.
Okay. But that's not what they're saying.
Well, it
I
seems
think it gets more into it a little bit, but like it's not saying that it has to be at certain times of day. It's saying that
well,
they there are certain assumptions made in terms of like how long things should take in terms of giving
okay.
birth.
My initial reading of this, which I mean, they didn't get into a lot of details, so maybe I imparted too much onto it, was I was thinking they were heading in the direction of saying that the hospitals are structured in a certain way and expect deliveries to happen in a certain like time, or like staff are available at certain times, or like things like this. I don't know. Maybe I read that wrong. We'll see. We'll read on. The first-hand experience and intuition of the woman giving birth is devalued in favor of timings and measurements related to the expected length of labor stages. Okay.
Yeah.
The spacing of contractions, the progress of cervical dilation, and other observations. Language such as failure to progress is common when a woman doesn't perform to the expected curve. A diversion from the clock time framework can be used to justify medical intervention. Interesting. This is one of the reasons that the home birthing movement has recently grown in popularity. I mean, but even this, I mean, like, I don't know. It's complicated in that like not everyone's birthing experience is the same and whatnot. I don't think we experience similar pressures like that, but it could just be the nature of how our the pregnancies of our children.
Yeah. I mean, and they probably wouldn't have phrased it in quite those terms to you. So it might just be not something that most people are necessarily like instantly and intimately aware of.
Yeah, and like part of it, like it's going to depend a lot on all kinds of circumstances, and biases and other shit like this. But like I remember because there was moments I think the only time that this like rings some sort of bell with me is the extent to which induction might happen or not, which is where they induce labor by like popping the sack.
Hmm.
And but I remember when that came up, it was still being like, well, we could do that, but it seemed like the choice there was an element of like, yeah, I didn't feel like pressured into it, like it was like a necessary thing. But like I don't know if again, it depends. I think if you're having certain medical complications, those choices might be a little bit more time constrained, or at least the perception of time constraint is
Yeah.
there. Likewise, new parents know that the baby itself becomes their clock, and any semblance of standardized time is preposterous. No, exactly. This 100, it still is 100% true. As my story about my children running around the house today, uh, this is 100% true. Like yeah. But in time, of course, the baby joins the rigid temporal hierarchy of school. Both this paragraph is just too real with me right now. With non-negotiable class and meal times forcing biological rhythms to adhere to socially acceptable clocks. Yeah. As Birth put it to me, the clock helps us with things that are uniform in duration, but anything that is not uniform, anything that varies, the clock screws up. When you try to schedule a natural process, nature doesn't cooperate.
Yeah.
And this is like, how do you make God laugh? You make plans. It's a very similar thought.
Sure.
Wait, you
Yeah.
never heard that? How do you make
I've
God
never
laugh?
heard that before, though. No.
I think that it's like an old aphorism, but I also think it was the name of or at least it they got the inspiration for it. Death Cab for Cutie. One of their albums is called Plants, and it's from that saying. A little bit of music knowledge for you.
Sure.
It's a great album, by the way. Plants by Death Cab for Cutie. In fact,
Okay.
Rachel and I chose as our song to dance to at our wedding. Anyways, random facts over. No more random facts.
Hmm.
In 2002, scientists watched in amazement as Larsen B, an ice shelf on the Antarctic Peninsula 55 times bigger than Manhattan. I love that it has the name Larsen B. What a weird fucking thing to name an iceberg. Which had been stable for 10,000 years, splintered and collapsed into hundreds of shards the size of skyscrapers. A glaciologist who flew overhead told Scientific American that he could see whales swimming in water where ice 1,000 feet thick had been just days earlier. Virtually overnight, precious clock time predictions around the mass loss of ice needed to be rewritten to acknowledge a 300% acceleration in the rate of change. In 2017, a piece of the nearby Larsen C ice shelf fell off, creating the world's biggest iceberg. So big that maps had to be redrawn. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change calls such abrupt events, which happen more often than you might think, surprises. Pretty weird thing to call those.
Yeah.
The climate crisis is a realm in which linear clock time frequently and fatally misfires. It frames the crisis as something that is measurable, quantifiable, and predictable, something we can envisage in the same way as work hours, holidays, chores, and projects. Warming temperatures, ocean acidification, ice melting, and carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere are constantly being translated into clock time to create tipping points, thresholds, roadmaps, and sustainable development goals for us to beat or aspire to. When a surprise happens, time estimates crumble in the face of reality. Nature doesn't cooperate. There is a sense in which like all the predictions that keep coming out, I feel like in a way work against themselves. Be like, we got 20 years left, or we got 30 years left, or whatever they say, where it's like it almost doesn't matter how much time we have left, just fucking do something about it. You know?
Yeah. But they're scientists. They're too stuck behind clocks.
Yeah. I don't even, like. I don't even know if it's like I feel like they're trying to use those measurements of time to like instill something in people. I think part of the thing is like there's still an element of people that don't care about clocks. You know, I think deep within all of us, we all don't care about time. We do because we're worried about being punished by our capitalist overlords. You know what I mean? But like, there's also an element of
Hmm.
which, like, yeah, that's later. Who fucking cares?
Um,
I'll get to it.
how much longer is the article?
Not much longer. We're almost at the end.
You check though,
Yeah.
just
Why?
in
What's
terms of
up?
like paragraphs. I really need to
Wait.
pee, so if it's okay, no,
Oh,
it's
yeah. Go for a pee.
it's enough paragraphs that I'm gonna, yeah. Okay, I'll be back.
We're all gonna die waiting for the appropriate time to take action. Yes. Well, actually, we're not all gonna die. I'm resigned to the fact that what is it? Resigned to the fact that it's not going to take all of us. It's going to take a large number of us, which is still bad. Just puts that into better framing. The only thing that might throw that off is if like something about the scale of change creates an overabundance of like I don't know cyanobacteria again, and then like we wipe out all of life in that way. But that might be fun. Start from scratch all over again. Evolution will have maybe the next intelligent creature that could evolve would be like really cool and have like 8 fingers or something. You know, that might be fun. Why not? And then the sun eventually will supernova and just take out all the progress that happened anyways, and then we'll have to wait for like the inevitable expansion, heat death of the universe, and the possible recollapse in the new expansion, and then maybe newer things will evolve again, and it'll all repeat itself. But at least on our little time we had here, we got to mine for some NFTs. Am I right? We killed a bunch of forests just so that I can own this and trade it on the stock market as an NFT, or at least trade the crypto which verifies the existence of the NFT. I know the environmental stuff it really just fucks with me. I don't know what I'm gonna do about all that shit. Even though what's happening in COP, whatever the hell it's called, I've barely been following it, but just like I mean, the only thing I've been following is the environmental activists being like, "This is a fucking joke," and it is. It is a fucking joke. And then you have people at home like pretending like we're doing something and not doing anything at all, which is what both America and Canada are doing right now. It's gonna be a fun ride. They're called non-fuckable tokens. They cost so much because they're made of computers. Yep. I mean, they also cost that much because they're being inflated due to certain trades being made. And when the crypto markets inevitably crash, they will be worth nothing, which they always were worth nothing. I mean, this image, this, it's priceless, but it will stay with us forever. There's something, I don't even, there's something just deeply fascinating with the whole NFT stuff of just people, being on the same earth that people are starving and can't have enough to eat. And there's a bunch of other people willing to throw money at such intangible things like a GIF that is connected with a code stored on a blockchain that is destroying a rainforest. You screenshotted my NFTs, so what? Doesn't mean you suddenly unlaundered my drug money. funny thing is, like, I do, the one argument of theirs I do understand in terms of just like the basic understandings of it is like, if you create some sort of artificial scarcity in that only one person can hold the like link, authenticating that this thing is truly yours, then that is different than merely right clicking and copying or whatever. It's just how much does that authentication should, how much should that be valued? And I don't think it should. It's just this like primal drive for fucking capitalists to be like, it's mine, and I own the original. And frankly, like, I don't give a shit about any of that. I don't give a shit about it. I don't care if I own the original. I don't care. And so I don't put any value on it. But apparently a bunch of people do. I mean, that, and there's the problem of copyright, which it's like it has value to it insofar as somehow having that link gives you the authenticity, but people are creating like these authenticity things and buying these NFTs when in reality they don't own the like copyright and other legal connections with these images. Legal ownership in some like legitimate sense, because like none of this is regulated, so have fun. But yes, the right click. I mean, I right clicked and saved that one person's. Let's see if I can. Where did I put it? Oh yeah, here. So this was this person's NFT. Look at this. This is someone's NFT. That is their profile picture. And so I right clicked and I saved it. I did what I was told that I should do. But then I'm like, why this? And like I get it. So I think he said he spent like $20 Canadian on it. In like, but like converted into whatever cryptocurrency he was using. But it's like, why do this? You could just like just like I said, I bought the artwork for our like Imperial News logo. This logo, I paid for it. I paid a little bit more than $20, but that's because I like the artist and I care about that stuff. But like, so yeah, I get this logo. Well, that's because I also paid for the animation as well. That if you go to our YouTube channel, it animates at the beginning of our video. But yeah, so I paid for this. But then the thing is, why would I need a certificate of authenticity for this? Like why? Similar to this, like why? Like who's going to say like take this and be like, no, I'm the real owner of it? And if someone goes around going, I'm the real owner of it, why do you care? Like I'm the one who commissioned our logo. Like why do I care if someone goes around being like, no, I own the NFT for it. I have the original authorization of it, authentication. The music on the YouTube channel is banger too. Yeah, so the music was by my buddy Mike, who is in the band Monster Fever.
I'm back, just by
Welcome.
the way. And I edited the title of the stream.
Title of the stream.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Did the title change?
Yeah, I changed the title.
Oh,
That's what I'm saying.
Aufheben construct abolished.
Can't
Oh,
call it
it's
Aufheben hours. Yeah.
I see what you did there.
Thank you.
And just before I get back to the article, yes, Grimpy, even at the beginning of the streams, a beat usually plays, and I'm hoping in the future I have a bunch more beats, a bunch more of the beats that my friends sent me, that I'm going to eventually, when I have some more time in life, if that ever happens, take like audio clips from Rebel News and put them into the beats in some capacity, and then cycle through them for the intro of the streams. Should be fun, but I do like his beat making ability. So yeah. And now back to time. No more of this NFT bullshit. Here we go. It works the same way for putting limits on the amount of time we have to stop global warming. The Guardian launched a blog called 100 Months to Save the World. In July 2008, that used scientific research and predictions to make it possible to estimate the length of time it will take to reach a tipping point. That was 154 months ago. Or like 54 months into the end of the world? Perhaps. But one can't help but wonder if the constant framing of the climate crisis in clock time deadlines, which then pass without comment, has contributed to the inability and inertia of many to comprehend the seriousness of what is actually happening. Yeah, that's basically what I was saying. Yep.
Hmm.
Yep. We can't say that clock time isn't important. VJ Kalinjivade.
Vijay.
Sorry?
Vijay Kolinjivadi. Kolinjivadi? I'm not sure on the last name.
Say my last name.
Tomchishin.
Okay. I was hoping that you would mispronounce it and then I would criticize you.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Jodadiah Tomchishin.
Uh, all right. A researcher at the University of Antwerp's Institute of Development Policy told me there's certain times when that metric makes a lot of sense, and we should use it for parties. For instance, you and I decide to talk at 10 a.m. There's no way to escape that. So yeah, this is basically what I was saying. But when we were thinking about capitalism, social crisis, and ecological breakdown, it gets problematic. Clock time, he went on, is always geared towards production, growth, and all the things that created this ecological crisis in the first place. I like this
Mm-hmm.
Vijay person. One of the
I
most
mean, he doesn't go far enough.
yeah. One of the most affecting myths of clock time is that we all experience time at the same steady pace. We don't. The future is already here, the science fiction author William Gibson famously said in 2003. It's just not very evenly distributed. And framing the climate crisis as a ticking clock with only a certain amount of time to avoid disaster ignores those for whom the disaster has already arrived. Yeah, exactly. The reality is that it's a privilege to live by clock time alone and ignore nature's urgent temporality. Yup.
Mm-hmm.
Every few years, the American Midwest is ravaged by floods as the Missouri River swells from intense rainfall, upending the lives of millions. When the floods came during the summer of 1993, a New York Times journalist interviewed a resident about the night he was evacuated. He remembers everything about the night. The river forced him and his wife out of the house where they had lived for 27 years. Except for this. I can't tell you what day it was. All I can tell you is that the river stage was 26 feet when we left. The headline of the article was They Measured Time by Feet.
Interesting.
Yeah. In 1992, the astrophysicist turned author Alan Lightman published a novel called Einstein's Dreams, in which he fictionalizes a young Albert Einstein dreaming about the multitude of ways that different interpretations of time would play out in the lives of those around him. In one dream, Einstein sees a world where time is not measured. There are no clocks, no calendars, no definite appointments. Events are triggered by other events, not by time. A house is begun when stone and lumber arrive at the building site. The stone quarry delivers stone when the quarryman needs money. Trains leave the station at the Bahnhofplatz when the cars are filled with passengers. In another, time is measured, but by the rhythms of drowsiness and sleep, the recurrence of hunger, the menstrual cycles of women, the duration of loneliness. Recently, there have been many attempts in both art and literature to reimagine the clock and the role it plays in our lives. At the end of the 2020, at the end of the 2020,
Yeah.
at the end of 2020, the artist David Horvitz exhibited a selection of clocks he had created, which included one that was synchronized to a heartbeat. Another artist, Scott Thrift, has developed a clock called Today, which simplifies the passage of time into dawn, noon, dusk, and midnight, as opposed to seconds, minutes, and hours. It moves at half the speed of a regular clock, making one full rotation in a day. Today.
I love that it's a clock called Today. Um
It should just like rather than like having like hands move, it should just say today.
yeah, like every
You know what I
time you
mean?
should just say today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't change. It literally
Um
is just a sign that says today. In that way, it will never be wrong because it's always today.
mhm.
Bastion herself has proposed clocks that are more responsive to the temporalities of the climate crisis, like a clock synchronized with the population levels of endangered sea turtles, an animal that has lived in the Pacific for 150 million years but now faces extinction due to temperature changes. These and other proposals all have the same idea at their core. There are more ways to arrange and synchronize ourselves with the world around us than the abstract clock time we hold so dear. I don't think this really rams the message home, in part because you have the anti-environmentalists who will say, well, look, things always go extinct. So it's not really the matter of a single species that goes extinct that has been here for 150 million years. It is more to do with the fact that a lot more are going extinct than usually do, which is harder, I think, to measure in terms of time. But still, a pretty neat idea. Clock time may have colonized the planet, but it did not completely destroy alternative traditions of timekeeping. Certain religions maintain a connection to time that is rooted in nature, like Salat in Islam and Zemain.
Oof.
Oh, I know. I'm sorry. I know.
You couldn't even hit the S on the Islam. Oh. Oh.
Salat
Salad.
in
I'm gonna kill
Islam.
myself. Like
Zemain of
you can't even do that voice because that's literally how you say it.
Judaism. Or I should say it like in Judaism.
Judaism.
In Judaism. I don't even believe in Judaism. Oh my god.
God.
In which prayer times are defined by natural phenomena like dawn, dusk, and the positioning of stars. The timing of these
It was
events may be.
actually
Sorry?
I was gonna actually like mention like Salat as like part of the kind of like when it about the clock with today on it because like you know the five prayers in Islam it's like Fajr is with um dawn and ends at sunrise and then like the other prayers are kind of just like staged throughout the day with like Maghrib being at like sunset and then Isha is when the like sun is fully down type of thing and I don't fully understand how like Zuhr and Asr work but like one is like right afternoon and then there is one that is kind of like between that and sunset I'm honest I'll be honest I haven't like ever looked up how those two are decided but
Interesting.
that one kind of like got into the like, clock called today type of thing.
Yeah, it is interesting how times for religions revolve around like prayer.
Yeah, but it's also just like based on the position of the sun.
Right. Well, I mean, like, yeah. It's just like it, but it's like the position of the sun relates in some ways to like the prayer itself, or like why this is a particular time to like mark. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
The timing of these events may be converted into clock time, but they are not determined by clock. That's right. Islam and Judaism is better than Christianity.
Yeah.
In places where globally standardized time is enforced, some still rebel, like in China, where the entire country is under one time zone. BST, for Best Standard Time.
Mm-hmm.
For Beijing Standard Time. In Xinjiang, nearly 2,000 miles west of Beijing.
No.
What? So you do it. Now let's compare.
The X is more like a sh, like a Xinjiang.
Xinjiang. Okay, there.
Yeah.
Nearly 2,000 miles west of Beijing. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Where the sun,
Sure.
where the sun sometimes sets at midnight, according to BST. Many Uyghur communities use their own form of local solar time. And indigenous communities around the world still use ecological calendars, which keep time through observations of seasonal changes. Native American tribes around Lake Oneida, for example, recognize a certain flower blooming as the time to start plowing and setting traps for animals emerging from hibernation. As opposed to a standardized clock and calendar format, these ecological calendars, by their very nature, reflect and respond to an ever-changing climate. In one of the last dreams in Lightman's book, Einstein imagines a world not too dissimilar from our own, where one great clock determines the time for everyone. It's interesting because, I mean, he was the one who discovered relativity, or at least theorized it.
Mm.
Every day, tens of thousands of people line up outside the Temple of Time, where the great clock resides, waiting their turn to enter and bow before it. They stand quietly, wrote Lightman, but secretly they see with their anger, for they must watch measured that which should not be measured. They must watch the precise passage of minutes and decades. They have been trapped by their own inventiveness and audacity, and they must pay with their lives.
Yeah.
I mean, the neat thing, like, I'm surprised they didn't get more into relativity in this article, which basically does argue that time. I mean, if you want to mess with the kind of rigid standards of time we do have, it's like the faster you move, you experience time differently.
Yeah, but that's not as relevant to like social phenomena, and I think that's what the article
Yeah.
was mostly focusing on.
I mean, it's more prospective, right? But like you can imagine like what happens if in a potential future where we're no longer earthbound and we're an interplanetary species, what happens to time then? For one, because our time seems so situated in us revolving around the sun, but then also once people start moving at close to the speed of light to do interplanetary travel, their times are now differing from one another.
See, the easiest solution to that is it's not going to happen, so
Yeah.
it's fine. Don't need to worry about it.
Listen, one can dream, all right?
Hello, my rebels. Hello, my rebels. I'm a good boy. I'm a weirdo.